Welcome to Saint of the Day. Today, July 25th, the Church honors Saint James the Greater, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. Before he ever heard the call of Christ, James was just a fisherman on the Sea of Galilee, working alongside his brother John. The two of them had such fiery tempers that Jesus nicknamed them, Sons of Thunder. Yet that same fire became fuel for something greater. James stood beside Jesus at the Transfiguration on Mount Tabor, and he was there too in the Garden of Gethsemane, in the most painful night before the cross. When Jesus asked if he could drink the same cup of suffering he was about to drink, James answered without hesitation, "We can." After the resurrection, tradition holds that he carried the gospel across the sea to Spain, and returned to Jerusalem, where he was beheaded by order of King Herod Agrippa around the year 44, becoming the very first apostle to die for Christ. Today he's the patron of Spain and of the countless pilgrims who walk the Camino de Santiago every year. His life teaches us that the same fire we feel for anger can become fuel for faith, once we hand our hearts over to God. On this same July 25th, centuries later, the Church also honors Saint Christopher, remembered across the Christian world as a giant of a man who only wanted to serve the greatest king alive. Tradition tells us he went from master to master, disappointed each time, until a wise hermit finally pointed him toward Christ. From then on, he devoted himself to carrying travelers across a dangerous river on his shoulders. One stormy night, a small child asked to cross, and halfway through the water the child's weight grew impossibly heavy, nearly pulling the giant under. Exhausted, reaching the far bank, he heard the answer, "Don't be surprised, you carried the weight of the whole world, and its creator too. I am Christ, your King." That's how he earned his name, Christopher, Christ-bearer. He went on evangelizing until he was martyred in the 3rd century. Today he's the beloved patron of drivers, sailors, travelers and pilgrims, which is why so many people still carry his medal in their cars. His story reminds us that serving others, even when it feels heavy, is a real way of carrying our faith. Still on July 25th, but many centuries later, the Church honors Saint Carmen Sallés, a Spanish foundress who died on this very date, in 1911. At a time when barely anyone invested in educating girls, Carmen turned down an arranged marriage and joined a community dedicated to helping women in vulnerable situations. But her vision reached further. She saw that the surest way to protect the hearts of young women wasn't only to rescue them after hardship, but to form them from childhood, in faith and solid learning. She faced real resistance within religious life itself, but never gave up, founding, in Burgos in 1892, the Conceptionist Missionary Sisters, and from there opening excellent schools for girls across Spain and beyond. Her motto says it all, forward, always forward. God will provide. She was canonized in 2012. Today she's the patron of Conceptionist schools and of every teacher who believes that education is itself a form of evangelization. Her life is an invitation to never accept no when it comes to defending the worth of those society too easily overlooks. Also on this July 25th, the Church remembers Blessed Antonio Lucci, an Italian Franciscan bishop born in 1682 into a humble family of shoemakers. Drawn to the preaching of the friars who cared for the poor of his hometown, he entered the Franciscan order as a young man and became such a respected preacher that crowds gathered to hear him alongside another future saint. He dreamed of ending his days quietly in a simple friary, but the Pope called him instead to shepherd the poor, troubled diocese of Bovino as bishop, in 1729. And even wearing the mitre, Antonio never stopped wearing his worn Franciscan habit underneath his bishop's robes, and he refused to keep the cathedral's own income for himself, redirecting every coin to schools, widows, and the elderly poor of the town. The people affectionately called him the Father of the City. He died on July 25, 1752, after years of walking through valleys to visit his flock in person. He was beatified in 1989. His life proves that authority and simplicity can, and should, walk hand in hand. In a very different way, the Church also honors today Blessed John Soreth, a French priest who reformed the Carmelite order and passed away on this exact date, July 25, 1471. He lived through a Europe wounded by the Black Death and by endless wars, a time when many monasteries had drifted far from their original discipline. Elected as the highest leader of the Carmelite order, John traveled tirelessly along dangerous roads to restore prayerful silence and structure where it had been lost. He's credited with founding, in 1452, the first enclosed convents for Carmelite nuns, a model that decades later would inspire Saint Teresa of Avila herself. During the brutal siege of the city of Liège in 1468, he risked his own life to rescue consecrated hosts in the middle of the chaos of war. According to tradition, his death may even have involved poisoning by opponents of his strict reforms. His final words were, "O good Jesus, be my Jesus." Today he's the patron of Carmelite tertiaries around the world. His life shows that restoring what's broken takes real courage, and it rarely comes cheap. Centuries later, still on this July 25th, the Church honors Blessed Ángel Darío Acosta, a Mexican priest known warmly as Padre Dario. Born in 1908 into a very poor family, he helped support his mother and siblings from a young age after his father died early. Even so, he answered the call to the priesthood and was ordained in 1931, right in the middle of Mexico's violent religious persecution, when priests were hunted down and killed in public simply for their faith. He was warned again and again to flee somewhere safe, but Dario refused to abandon his people. Just 3 months after his ordination, on July 25, 1931, soldiers stormed the church where he was serving and opened fire on him and other clergy present, in front of terrified children attending catechism class. His final whispered words were simply, "Jesus." He was only 22 years old. He was canonized among the Mexican martyrs in 2005. His life reminds us that courage is often not the absence of fear, it's choosing to stay, even knowing the cost. The Church also keeps, on this same day, the memory of Blessed Maria Teresa Kowalska, a Polish nun who died on July 25, 1941, a victim of Nazi cruelty. Born in Warsaw into a family that had drifted far from faith, she found her own way back to God and entered the Capuchin Poor Clares, living a life of quiet simplicity despite the tuberculosis already weakening her lungs. When the Nazis invaded Poland, she and 35 other sisters were dragged to the Zajldo concentration camp, where they endured hunger, humiliation, and disease. Weak and suffering, Maria Teresa still told her companions, "I will not leave this place, I offer my life so my sisters may return to the monastery." She died shortly after, and remarkably, weeks later, the surviving 35 sisters were in fact released. She was canonized by John Paul II. Today she's the patron of prisoners and of anyone who suffers quietly for a greater cause. Her sacrifice shows that even the quietest offering can end up saving lives we'll never fully know about. Going back several centuries, the Church also honors today the Martyrs of Cuncolim, 5 Jesuit missionaries and their lay companions killed on July 25, 1583, in a small village in Goa, India. Led by Father Rodolfo Acquaviva, a man so respected he had once debated theology directly with the powerful Emperor Akbar himself, inside one of the greatest courts of the East, the missionaries had been sent to evangelize a region already tense after foreign troops, unrelated to their mission, had destroyed local temples and stirred deep resentment among the villagers. Fully aware of the real danger, they chose to go forward anyway, trusting in providence rather than turning back. They were ambushed by an armed crowd of angry villagers, and Father Rodolfo, instead of resisting or fleeing for his life, knelt quietly and offered his own neck to the blow. He and his companions were killed together on the spot, that same day. They were beatified centuries later by Pope Leo XIII. Today they're remembered as patrons of distant and dangerous missions around the world. Their story leaves us with a question worth sitting with: how far are we truly willing to go for what we believe? Further back still, around the year 304, in the middle of the fierce Diocletian persecutions, the Church honors Saint Cucuphas, a wealthy merchant from North Africa who gave up everything, gold, silk, comfort, status, to cross the Mediterranean and carry the Christian faith to the region of present-day Barcelona, Spain. There, he handed out his riches to orphan children in the streets and preached openly in public squares, which quickly drew the fury of Roman authorities during the fierce persecution under Emperor Diocletian. Arrested and tortured brutally, according to ancient accounts, he faced it all with a steadiness that impressed even his own executioners, before finally being beheaded by the sword. On the very site of his martyrdom, a great abbey rose centuries later, in the town of Sant Cugat del Vallès, named in his honor to this very day. He's invoked as protector against theft and robbery, and as an intercessor for back pain among the elderly. His life is a living reminder that true wealth isn't found in keeping, but in giving it all away. And we close out today, July 25th, with Saint Glodesind of Metz, a young noblewoman who lived in present-day France around the year 608. Even as a child, she dreamed of consecrating her life to God, but her family forced her instead into an arranged marriage at just 12 years old. Not long after, tragically, her husband was killed amid the political violence of the era. Rather than accept another marriage forced upon her, Glodesind fled and took refuge at the altars of a cathedral, begging for sanctuary as a consecrated woman, and refusing to leave, even under pressure. Moved by her determination, her own father eventually founded a monastery in the region, where she lived out her days in prayer, and where many healing miracles were later attributed to her intercession. Today she's remembered as a source of strength for anyone resisting decisions forced upon their conscience and their faith. And that brings us to the end of today's journey through the saints of July 25th. If these stories touched your heart, subscribe to Saint of the Day, comment asking for one of these saints' intercession for someone you love, and share this video with anyone who needs to hear this message today. The full prayer to each of them is in the description. See you tomorrow.